So I guess before we get down to the sort of nuts and bolts of the idea of having meaningful working relationships, because I think if you don't get on with your mother-in-law, you could think about it as a meaningful working relationship and therefore make it work, right? So before we get to that point of sort of like distilling all of that, what constitutes a meaningful working relationship? How would you define it? What's important? What elements?
And that's a great question to start off with, because that was actually the question I had in mind as well. So when you want to answer the question of what's a great meaningful working relationship, first you've got to define what is a meaningful relationship to yourself. And the answer to that is different for every individual. So if you want to build great, meaningful relationships at the office, you've got to ask yourself, what is a relationship? What would it look like in a form that would be meaningful to you? And like I said, the difficult part here is that it's different for every individual. So I would say that if you want to define that, then a conversation needs to happen between the people who are involved in that relationship so that they both get clarity about what is meaningful to both parties and then can start working towards that. So defining it, I'd say that's a really good first step.
Okay, so what if what if you're in a situation where I'm sure a lot of people are, where these are the kind of conversations no one would ever dream of having because it's just too awkward and weird. So, say I am the kind of person who's really professional and I really want to sort of give 150% to my job, and I'm working with someone like JD who is
less
just
professional.
he's just in it to clock in and clock out. It's just a job. The job pays him X amount so he can, keep sort of repairing his motorbikes that he likes. He collects a lot of motorbikes. Matchbox sized motorbikes, Lego motorbikes. So, it's like to sort of, you've got your different sort of models of the world in terms of what the job means to somebody. So, if you cannot have that kind of thing, and you were to sort of take on the responsibility of wanting to have a maybe meaningful relationship with your workplace, first of all, would that be somewhere you could start?
Yeah, you know what? I can tell that this relationship is off to a great start already. Well done. So you know what? And that's the thing, right? There are several things that we've got to talk about here. First is that, well, does everybody want that meaningful relationship? Most people go to a job, and here's the reality of it, right? We want the meaning behind it, but we don't necessarily, want to make an effort for it. And because of that, most people go to work, and then we come back from work, and then we get to life after work, which is where the issue that I have with the phrase work-life balance, because it seems to say that work isn't a part of life, which I personally, don't agree with. So if you're like me and you think that work is a large part of life, then it makes sense that you want to have, strong meaning at work. And strong meaning at work, part of the aspects of having a meaningful job is to have strong, meaningful relationships at the job. So then the question is, how then do I get to that space when everybody may not share my definition of meaning at work or meaning at relationship, right? JD wants to go home, work on his life. And Asha wants to give 100%.
No, I don't want to give 100%.
150.
Yeah, I'm giving enough, You know what I mean? Yeah.
You just don't want to put out.
John's thinking, wow, I can make a lot of money off this too.
I should talk to your bosses. But yeah, you know what? So it's about finding common ground, I think, because even with I want to put on record, there's nothing absolutely wrong with wanting to go to work, getting the job done, and then coming back and then really focusing on the things that you want to do. Because at the end of the day, you're paid to do something, and therefore, if you're paid to do something and you deliver what you're paid to do, that's what the job entails, right? The problem happens when we don't deliver what we're paid to deliver. That's where the disconnect comes in. And if an individual is okay with that, as opposed to an individual who's not okay with that, then these fundamental differences may result in that relationship being extremely rocky. Now, having said that, I've been in the training and consulting line for 20. This is my 21st year, so 21 years now. And I may be a little bit, idealistic, but I think, and I found that most people don't go to work to do a bad job. We don't go in the office to do a bad job. We don't sign up to do a bad job. So really very few people actually find meaning in actually being bad at work. So that's the first common ground, right? And identifying the common ground is really important for a relationship to become meaningful. Now, the mistake that most people make is that we tend to focus on the differences rather than the commonalities. And that's a recipe for disaster. You know this, I know this. If you look at the state of how, sometimes political parties, they use race, they use religion, and they use that as a divisive factor rather than focusing on, us being Malaysians, all the common things that we have that help to unite people. Relationships are like that. If you build a relationship on the things that you have in common, then the differences will enrich us. But if you focus on the relationship being on the differences, then you're going to find that the commonalities are sort of diluted, or they disappear from the thoughts of the individual. So start from commonalities, start from the common ground. That's a good place to go.
So the onus then is on the person, basically, the individual.
Your relationship. So why rely on somebody else to strengthen your relationship?
But a lot of people do, right? Don't you think? It's sort of like there is this thing. It's always up to somebody else. They need to make the effort. I think we, as a sort of society, are very outward blaming as to why things aren't going our way.
Absolutely, and I think it's not just about our society. I think human nature is such that we tend to do that, right? And since we're talking about working, yeah, we're talking to you, JD.
Wow!
Your fault.
Wow! Ganged up on day one. My God.
Yeah, we're gonna gang up with you. So we're talking about working relationships, and if you're talking about working relationships, you just got to analyze, when you look at organizational culture, for example, and an employee will always point the finger to the organization and to management to build organizational culture. Very few employees look at themselves as, hey, I'm part of this organization and therefore I need to build organizational culture. And that's just an example of what Asha was talking about, right? That we tend to be more outward looking. Somebody should do something about it. It's somebody else's responsibility. But I tend to go on the basis that you want to be able to empower yourself to act. And the first thing in order to empower yourself to act is by acknowledging that you have authority and you have power to do something about it. So if it's your relationships that you want to build so that you have meaning, then why are you waiting for your organization or your manager or whoever is the other party to start acting on? You get what I mean?
Yeah. So, okay. So, given the fact that basically sort of the little person feels they have no power, and I'm not being diminishing when I say this, it's like, big organization. It's like those are the parents and grandparents. It's like we are the kids, we have no power. So that may be sort of very difficult to shift. However, if we wanted to build and then strengthen relationships at work and working relationships, because they're not necessarily the same thing.
Right.
And we wanted to take the onus on and do it sort of in a safe way to sort of start practicing it, to bring this even to an awareness. What are some of the things, people could do?
Okay, so we started off the conversation talking about defining what was a meaningful relationship. And I want to reiterate that that's probably the best place to start, because it's always about starting with the end in mind. So here's my philosophy about getting results. One, you've got to be clear about the results, right? Once you're clear about the results, then we can talk about, how you're going to get there. Because if you're not clear about what you want, there's no way you're going to get there. So there are 4 basic elements that you can talk about here. We're talking about mindsets. Mindsets then move on to behaviors. They influence behaviors, and behaviors over a certain period of time build habits. Those habits are the ones that get you results. Now, this happens whether you like it or not. This happens whether you're conscious about it or not. Okay, and that's what most people don't realize. This is the pattern, whether or not you realize it. Now, once you are aware of the fact that your mindset impacts your behaviors, and your behaviors build habits, and your habits build results, then the question is, so what kind of results do you want? And if you're clear on those results, then you got to start asking yourself, do I have that result at the back of my mind, or even at the front of your mind all the time? Or are you just, saying, yeah, this guy is like that, and that person's like this, such a pain in the dude, and so on.
Nice,
See,
nice.
I self-censor.
Yeah, I like it. Nice pitch there. Carry on.
So if you're clear about what you want, then you got to ask yourself the question of, what are my thinking patterns? Are my thinking patterns supporting what I want? So if I want a relationship with my colleague that is friendlier, for example, and I'm clear about that. So instead of saying the relationship's not working, there's no chemistry, we don't get along, which isn't talking about what you want. You're just describing the relationship right now. But if you're clear that I want this relationship to be friendlier or more productive, I want it to a level where we can have good conversations, be able to describe that meaningful relationship. Then the question is my mindset supporting those results? Am I saying that this is possible, or am I saying to myself, this is never going to work out? Because if you say that's what I want, but you're telling yourself this is never going to work out, that's called daydreaming.
So as long as you go into it, number one, with your eyes open, that you want to build a stronger relationship with whoever it is in your organization, maybe as a colleague or whatever, maybe even your boss, you have to want to have a better relationship, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
At the most basic, right? But what if the other person is like resist? I'm not blaming again. I'm not pointing my fingers at anything. But what if the other person is like, I can see you're putting in the effort, but
whatever,
or
they just really don't like you. They had the bee in the bonnet and they can't stand you. Yes. And it's like, you have to work with this person, and it's toxic to walk into the office because you get in the cold shoulder all the time. And no matter what you do, how nicely you talk, you just seem to irritate that person more.
You're putting in the effort, but
right. So then I suppose the question is, how badly do you want it?
Well, right. So you keep plugging away, keep going, and until that person likes you?
No.
Maybe.
Blackmail.
Maybe. Why? How badly do you want it, and why do you want it so badly? Because it's all about priorities. If I think this person, is a big stakeholder in my career, a big stakeholder in my life, has a huge impact on where my career could be headed, you know what? I might want to put in more than what I think is normal effort. But if this person is abusive, the work environment is terrible, and like you said, you've tried your best, but people are still, the person is still not responding. And you got to be careful about what trying your best actually means, because some people
tell us more about that.
Mean?
Well, yeah, exactly. What do you mean? Be careful about try your best. I use that all the time.
Because I could say my New Year resolution is to get fitter, and then by the first week of January say that I've tried my best and it's not working out.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So you got to be honest with yourself about what your best is, and then you've also got to be realistic about what your best is possible. What your possible best looks like. You got to be really honest with yourself. And you got to be really, really realistic about what's possible and what's not. So if I have in my mind, I'm going to turn this person into my best buddy at work, and he right now is my worst enemy at work. And because in the first week of January, I bought him lunch, so he should be my best friend now. Yeah, that's probably not going to happen. You know what I mean? So you gotta be realistic, and you gotta plug at it. And that's why we said mindsets to behaviors to
to habits.
habits. Now, once you get into the habit of things, that's when real results starts to happen. Most people don't reach a habitual stage; they reach behaviors, right? So
Can I just stop you first, just before we
Sure.
get to that second part, which I'm very interested in. But so, am I understanding just from what you were just saying? Basically, if I decided that I wanted to have a friendship with you because I needed to get more advanced in the company, that's not going to work out for me. But if basically using somebody like, I bought you lunch, so you should like me. So basically it's just for the sake of getting you to like me or to have a relationship because it makes my life easier, versus, as you were saying, the outcome of looking actually at the big picture of what that working relationship is, like being, dare I say it, grown up about it, like what that outcome is. And the outcome is, I really want to do well in this company. And for that to happen, I need my team I need to be working in a good team. So that means I got to win this guy over to my side. That's a very different story to, I need him to like me to put in a good word, right? Do you see what I mean? It's like the outcome has to be measured.
Well, it again, you got to fall back on what's a meaningful relationship to you. So if the meaningful relationship to you is that you want this person to like you so that you can, he or she can do stuff for you, it might be a meaningful relationship for you, but probably not so much for the other person. And in that situation, I doubt that's going to last very long, right? Am I saying that it's wrong? Well, let's face it, most of us have a little bit of self-centeredness,
Not me. Okay.
Yeah.
He said most. He
Other than
didn't
the
say
two,
all. He said most.
other than the two of you guys who are the epitome of altruism, we all have a certain level of self-centeredness, and we all want to make ourselves feel good. And the reason why we're talking about meaningful relationships is because the relationship gave me something. It's got to provide me something for it to become meaningful. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't be nice to the person if you want something. I'm saying continue being nice to the person, and once it becomes a habit, you're going to find that the relationship becomes a lot more meaningful for you and the other party.
So outcome has been decided first, the result you want to get. Then it's doing things that actually work towards getting that outcome.
Right.
What do you mean by making that a habit then? So say, for example, I've decided that one of the things I'll do is every Monday, I'm going to bring breakfast into work, because it's a great way for the team to kind of all sit down. That we don't have to sit them together, but there's something there. It just has a bit of a homey environment, right? So that's every Monday. That's kind of habitual. But with the other things, like if I want the team to be at least communicating, say everyone's at each other's throats, and it's not a nice environment to live in. But I would just want everyone to be cordial, because that'll be a better that will be a working relationship versus a dysfunctional, right? So what else would I be doing and thinking as an individual who wants to kick this off that I would then have to be repeating in order for it to become a habit, a habitual?
Wow.
Could you give us an example? So that
there's a whole load of elements that you got to consider. One, are you the team manager? So let's say I'm the team manager, and I've got the two of you who are at loggerheads all the time. And now,
What's day? Okay, yeah.
I'm not just talking about meaningful relationships between me and you guys, but between the two of you guys. But because I'm the manager, I'm also the person who's got to build a culture within our working unit, right? So I got to be clear on the results that I want. We've stated that already. My mindset, I've got to know that it is possible and I can do something about it. And then the question is, okay, what can I do that will help these individuals, not be at loggerheads? Now, because I am the manager, I probably have a little bit more authority and a little bit more power, and it might be a little bit easier than if the opposite was true. So if the two of you were my bosses and I'm the subordinate, that would probably make life a little bit more complicated, right? So if I'm the manager, the question is now, what's my role? What kind of example am I demonstrating? What kind of behaviors will I and can I demonstrate that will help them see that this is the kind of behaviors that is to be expected? Okay, so I would say whenever I feel tempted to raise my voice, whenever Asha raises a voice, I'm going to be the person who's the first to step back and say, okay, guys, let's calm down. We're getting a little bit more emotional. Let's not go down that road. Let's talk about this in a rational manner. And that's behavior. So I could set that intention in, like I said, New Year resolutions, first week of January and second week of January, demonstrate that behavior. But if this behavior is not continued throughout the year, it's not going to become real. And people are just going to say, you know, the Malay saying of hangat-hangat tai ayam, right? So in that sense,
it only like it only works for the early stages,
Right.
basically.
And it might not, well, it might work in the early few stages, or you demonstrate it in the early few stages. But at the end of the day, people don't judge you by your early actions. People judge you in terms of consistency. And if you can control your temper in that sense, over a period of time, 6 months, over a year, you're going to find that that's going to rub off to the rest of the team members. Because in this particular example, a person who keeps raising their voice and keeps shouting will start to feel really, really stupid if the other person is not responding. You know, I can only be angry and emotional for so long before I start feeling really dumb if I'm the only one doing that. But if there are two people doing that, then we sort of feed off that energy and it sort of escalates. So in this particular example, if I refuse to participate in this exchange, you're going to find that the energy levels drop and people become more cordial. And after a while, they learn that, hey, we can, you know, fix these things without necessarily raising our voice. But that can only happen after they've built the habit of not raising their voice.
Right.
So you're basically not fooling yourself. You're conditioning yourself to be like, initially it's a bit tough. New Year's resolution, I want to do this. The more I keep plugging away, my body just conditions itself to like, okay, this is how it's going to be from now on.
Yes.
And I'm going to stick to it from now on.
Yes. And this is the basis of almost any and every kind of result that you want. And it's not just applicable to relationships, it's applicable to anything. As long as you're looking to get a certain kind of results, you've got to ask yourself, does your mindset support it? And what are the behaviors that you need to start demonstrating? And how can you keep plugging away at those behaviors over the period of time necessary in order for you to get results? So in this case, we're talking about you using this philosophy in the building of a relationship or the repairing of a relationship.
Right.
Okay, so what do you do then? I mean, like you used the example of sort of like, obviously a manager having a bit more power to sort of instigate changes, to sort of start the building blocks of what will then become the culture. Because obviously culture isn't sort of, it's all ideas first, right? Until it's sort of put into practice, and it is the environment of what behavior is acceptable and what isn't, right? But within that sort of group, you have the individuals that are unwitting or unwilling, or voluntarily sort of participating adults in there. How can they best support each other? How can they best sort of help to build up on that culture, to maintain it, to make it even stronger, or turn these components into what then becomes the culture, especially during times like this where, you know, there is lockdown fatigue, there is a lot of fatigue going on, there's extended sense of unease, unhappiness, unsurety, you know.
So, okay, so there's several elements here. First element is when you talk about building a habit, you got to be aware that building a habit involves demonstrating that behavior even when you don't feel like it. Okay, and that's
Oh, it's like going to the gym.
It's like brushing your hair.
Okay, sure.
Right. Moving on.
You see, we're just not there yet.
So in that sense, like I said, the philosophy sort of is applicable to almost every aspect of life, right? You just got to keep plugging away at it. And you got to be aware that it's going to take time. So you got to be realistic about what can and cannot be achieved within a certain period of time, because otherwise you get this illusion. Now, the other thing that you got to consider is that it's always easier and better if you have a group of people who are like-minded as you, working towards that common goal. So if you're saying, how do we get a group of people working towards that culture? My philosophy and the philosophy that we've used in our consulting business all these years is that the person with the higher authority, there's I suppose, bigger onus on the person with more authority to do more. And therefore, if you talk about culture building, and if meaningful relationships is a part of the culture within the organization, then the managers and the management needs to have conversations and strategies and initiatives and actions over a period of time that support that. And once that is demonstrated over 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, it's going to slowly become embedded, and you find that people behave in that manner. They may not necessarily realize that they are behaving in that manner, but they will.
So it's from top down. So basically, the boss has a lot to do with how we're going to be with each other.
We're talking about.
So it's Aaron's.
It's his fault.
It's Aaron's
It's his
fault and
fault.
responsibility.
According to John, it's true.
Okay. Well, he's the expert. I mean, he's been doing it for 30 years. Okay, so I have a question. I've got a question.
So we're talking about culture, right? And that's on a macro scale. If on a big picture, if the management thinks that meaningful relationships is part of the culture of the organization, and therefore they want to build that. But going to a more practical manner, I think whether or not it's formalized from the management, I think every individual wants to have meaningful relationships at work, especially when you're looking at the hate to use the phrase, but everybody knows it, right? Millennials, the younger people who are coming into the job market these days. Meaningful relationships are very important for this group of people. So meaningful work, meaningful purpose at work, and meaningful relationships at work. So it makes sense for bosses to consider this. It also makes sense for us as individual managers when dealing with individuals as well.
Actually, something you said is quite interesting, because the two generations above us, I think, prized or valued meaningful relationships at work above and beyond the actual job itself. So you could be a road sweeper, a postman, or whatever, and you'd go and do your job, and you do your job. As you said, no one wants to go and do a bad job. They're quite happy if they do an okay job, because, this is not my aspirational job. I love doing my hobby. My hobby's whatever it is, painting boats, fixing boats, but I am doing this to pay my rent and stuff. So I value my job for what it can give. But I think, you talk about millennials, but I know my grandparents valued the people they worked with. In fact, even my father has the same people working with him who have worked with him for 30, 40 years. So it's interesting how there seems to be a sort of a bit of a gap in terms of we've lost this concept and understanding that a meaningful working relationship or meaningful relationship at work can actually be the beautiful part of having to do this kind of job in order to get this pay so that you can pay your rent and stuff. Or is that just a too shallow, look?
I haven't really done a study about that, but just based on that, there might be some questions, right? So if I would look at my dad as well, and obviously he's got friends that he's had, because he was in the government service for his entire life. and he's still got friends from there. Then the question is, was the friendship built because of loyalty to the job? And because by virtue that we spent so much time there together, that meaning came out of that, versus the other way around. Now you have millennials who want that meaning at the job, but I don't have to stay in that job forever. I'm not bound to that job because of my duty or because of my responsibilities or because of my commitments, right? And that's the reality for most middle income millennials anyway. So, and I'm going to get myself, I don't know whether I'm going to get myself into trouble. It's sort of
you could get cancelled. Think very carefully.
Yeah.
Scare the grandpa we're interviewing here.
Sometimes I see, okay, I'm not sure. And I'm gonna make a caveat here. This is just based purely on my perspective. I'm not an expert in this. I sometimes see arranged marriages lasting a lot longer. And sometimes I wonder whether it's because they didn't give themselves a choice of, I'm gonna, get out of this relationship. So on that basis, because 2 generations ago, quitting the job wasn't a very big choice. It was, in some cases, in most cases, it wasn't even a choice, right? I can't quit the job because I need the job. And therefore, because, the 3-4 of us have that same mentality, hey, we can't quit this job. We gotta make sure we are able to keep that job. That's the common ground. And from there, because we spend so much time together, we build friendships, we get to know each other a little bit more, and therefore meaning comes in. Versus what we have today, which is, I'm going to go in looking for a meaningful job. I'm going to go in looking for a meaningful relationship. And if I can't find it, you know what? I'm going to go look somewhere else. So this is for all the young folk who are listening in. You might find that it's more realistic to build a meaningful working relationship, to build a meaningful working culture, or at least be part of that building process, rather than the searching process. So one is easier, and it's easier to search, because searching implies that it's somebody else's relationship, somebody else's responsibility to build that relationship and do something so that I can then jump in on it. So it's definitely easier, but you're probably not going to find it.
Right.
So on that very happy note, that's it for the show. I'm joking. No, it's interesting what you said there about being a part of actually changing. I think that that's been repeated several times over and over, and it's like, water your damn garden where you are is the running message here.
Yeah, it's like, you're in prison already.
Yeah,
make the best of it.
Water your garden. At least you'll have cilantro.
And you know what? Nelson Mandela was a great example of that, right?
He had a garden in prison.
No, not the garden. Go away, Asha. Bye-bye.
I actually honestly thought you were referring to what JD last said.
Well, in a way he was.
This is jet-lagged brain. I'm perimenopausal. Don't blame me.
I'm sorry, I don't know much about that, so I'm not gonna
It's a good thing too, mate.
I know.
If you were suffering from that, I'd be worried. Okay.
Oh my goodness.
JD, any
last thoughts?
last thoughts.
Final words of advice, I guess, for Asha and me. Where do we go from here to build
where we go from here for building? But I think, like, what if conflict does come up? Like, what's something to do as conflict is coming up, as you are aware, before it gets to the blow stage, or the I hate this, I'm quitting, or I'm leaving, or whatever, like.
Right. So I think sometimes when you got to look at conflict a little bit differently. I think some conflict is not necessarily bad for a relationship. I'm very conscious and cautious about relationships that don't have conflict, because that just basically means it's a pretty shallow relationship. Deep relationships, you're going to get into conflict, and you got to expect that you're going to get into conflict. The only types of relationships that you don't have conflict is the one that's shallow. So, for example, your relationship with your uncle selling the wonton mee, outside. That's a pretty shallow relationship, and therefore it's pretty cordial, right? Every time you meet each other, or even if you meet each other when outside, not at the wonton mee stall, it's still going to be pretty cordial. That's because it's shallow. It's a transactional relationship. So you do have and that's why some people prefer to keep their professional relationships shallow, because it doesn't have a conflict. So the mindset is, don't care lah, whatever. It's just a job. It's just a job.
It's easier to be nice, basically.
It's easier, or easier to just ignore it. So
right.
JD is like that. Whatever lah. He does his, I do my job. I don't really care lah. Right? It's always easier. And if that rocks your world and that helps you get things done, fine. Nothing wrong with that. But if you're sweeping things under the carpet, or it's impacting not just the relationship, but it's impacting your mental health, it's impacting the output of the work that you do, then that attitude is not going to work. Or if the reality is that the relationship is deep, but you just want to pretend it is shallow, that's not going to work either. So conflict's not bad. Let's.
I mean, who haven't you fought with that you love, or upset, or betrayed, or whatever, right? Do you fight with your best friend?
No, I'm a fly off, and I'd rather not have conflict kind of guy.
Yeah.
Got best friend or not?
Not really.
No, but it's interesting though, because for some people they have different friends for different parts or different things. So it's not, there's no one, like a lot of us don't have just one, best friend that who lives in your pocket.
Because I'd much rather have a pleasant experience doing something, and do it, and we're all good after that, and then move on. That's not wrong to have, right?
I'm so confrontational. We're going to be in so much trouble. I'll be like, right, we need to talk about this, right? We need to fix this.
And I will agree with everything you say.
No, that's terrible. Then I'll feel guilty for bullying you. You would have made me bully you, even though I wasn't bullying you. Like, you would have done that to me. You would have turned me into bullying.
If he enjoys the bullying, that's fine.
It works, man. I'm like, whatever you say, dear.
Yeah. Right.
When can you come in to the office?
So, okay, John,
yes.
If there's one final piece of advice for people at work who are currently in conflict right now, I suppose.
Yeah.
Because the times are strange.
Or feeling conflicted, and then that sort of rubs off, doesn't it, with how you are?
If there's one thing that we can do right now, especially during COVID, to overcome all these conflicts, what would that be?
Confront it and resolve it. And I know for people with like you and me, actually, JD, we're more conflict avoidant. I don't like it when people are, what's wrong with you and why did you do that? That's not my style in resolving conflicts or in having somebody approach me. But I've also realized that I don't have to resolve conflict in that manner. I can go and resolve conflict in a gentler manner, but it needs to be resolved. It's when I pretend that there is no issue, that's when it gets into trouble.
That's also quite passive aggressive, yeah.
Yeah,
it works.
Yeah.
You don't know I'm solving problems, but it's still gonna get solved.
Do you know what? I think this is actually a really amazing topic. I think we need to have you back on to talk about resolving conflict or being confrontational in a non-confrontational manner.
Exactly. But
is that how you're telling me that time's up and I need to go away?
for now. But John, this was really interesting. We will be getting you back on because
Yeah,
You're
I'd
right.
really like to
Yeah, yeah.
like how do we have those, because people, for people like JD to learn to be able to actually bring something to the table, because maybe up till now he's no, I'm honestly, seriously, maybe up to now he's so easy and laid back that nothing, has really kind of bugged you so much, but then maybe something does happen.
No, a lot of things bug me, but I just like
Oh,
I have other ways to deal with it, and I'm like, if this is too much work to get around, and then things are not going to change, I'll find another route around it.
oh, okay.
Yeah, which is great. It's when nothing bugs you. That's when we probably really have to have a serious talk. But
Okay.
if it's about finding an alternative to the problem, that's perfectly fine.